Welcome back. This is part 3 of ECO 501, sections 1 and 2, week 4, summer semester 2021, BRAC University MBA program. In parts 1 and 2, we looked at concepts that we basically wanted to look at in week 3, which we couldn't due to some issues. So in this part 3, we'll look at some basics of demand and supply analysis. So let's get back to the slides. Okay, so this is not string, this is summer. Okay, so our reference point right now is McGuigan chapters 2 and 3. Although over here it's written that chapter 2 is 28 to 62 and chapter 3 is 64 to 98, we will be covering selected parts of these two chapters in this week and also the next week. Whatever we cover, the numbers will be given on the right. So when you see demand and supply with the number 29, that means it's page 29 in McGuigan, etc. So we're going to look at the demand and supply. Marginal analysis, we'll look at it again. And then we're going to look at net present value. Now, demand and supply are just like two sides of a balance, which we've already discussed in week 2. So if this is the demand and this is supply, if demand is heavier, that means the households are willing to pay a higher price. So as the households pay a higher price, supply starts to increase. Those who are willing to buy, they start buying. This process goes on to like this. If supply is more than demand, that means farms have produced more than what the households want to buy. So in that case, intuitively, the opposite will happen. Price will start to fall until a balance is restored in the market. So when we look at a demand and supply curve or a demand curve or a supply curve, what we ask is, if this is the market price, what is the amount that is demanded by the households? What is the amount that is being produced by the households? So if we have an equilibrium, there's no tendency for further change. The balances meet just like this. Otherwise, we see at the market price, we see what is the quantity demanded and what is the quantity supplied. If the demand is more than the supply at the market price, there's shortage. If supply is more than demand at the market price, there's surplus. Now, figure 2.1 on page 30 shows a typical demand and supply curve. It shows demand as a straight line, supply as a straight line. In reality, it may not be like that. But one thing is for sure, the demand curve will always be downward sloping because we observe a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. The higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. Supply will always be positively sloped. It will be upwards. The higher the price, the more tendency for firms to produce. That's obvious. But in the graph, if you observe very carefully, it's written desired rate of purchase for demand, planned rate of sale for supply. And then we see an equilibrium. What's desired rate of purchase? Before households make a purchase, they look at the price. They think, okay, we're going to do this amount of buying for this month. Then they make the purchase. The firms act similarly. They see the market price and they decide, okay, in the next time period, we're going to produce this amount of units of the product. That's why the demand and the supply curves are not what actually people end up buying or actually what firms end up producing. Desired rate is what households are planning to buy. Planned rate of sales is what firms are deciding to sell in the next time period. Now, there's 3 possibilities. At price, if we see demand is more than supply, this was demand, this was supply. So demand is heavier than supply. Intuitively, it's a shortage. If we see the opposite, supply is more, demand is less, we see a surplus. If they balance, it's equilibrium. Markets never are in equilibrium. You go to Karan Bazaar, to the fish market, there will always be some sellers who will say, I couldn't finish my stock today. There will always be some buyers who will say, oh, I couldn't buy fish at a good price today. What this model shows us is it predicts what is expected, not what actually happens. That's why this graph is a very good presentation by saying that demand is desired rate of purchase, supply is planned rate of sale. Over here, look at the three prices again. P0, what do we observe? We observe exactly what we saw over here. Demand is more than supply at P. So when price is P0, demand, which is this, is more than supply. So there's a deficit or shortage. If the price is P1, then one part of the market, which are the firms, they're happy. They produce a lot, but the households are planning to buy less. So there's a surplus in the market. Only and only if the price matches, do we get demand, equilibrium. Now, when there is a shortage in the market, household, a little while ago that I just said, households are willing to buy more. So they're willing to offer a higher price. Price will tend to go up. When there's a surplus, firms have overproduced. So in order to get rid of their excess stock, firms will have an incentive to reduce the price. And at equilibrium, price will have a tendency to neither increase nor decrease. That then will be the definition of equilibrium. Now, so far we have said that we're talking about market demand curves, market supply curves. This is the demand of all the households in the market. This is the supply of all firms in the market. Now, where does the market supply come from? The market supply comes from sum total of all individual supplies. Where does the market demand curve come from? The demand curve comes from sum total of all individual households' demand. Now, on page 34, we see a functional relationship, which we have already discussed in part 2 this week. Quantity demanded is a function of price. Here we see an extension of that function. We see quantity demanded is not only a function of price, it's a function of 3 other variables. PS, a substitute good, which influences the demand for of the original good. PC is a complement good, whose price also influences the demand of the original good. Y is income, which also influences the demand of the original good. Now, you could say there are 300 more factors, yes, but the main 4 factors that we will be interested in and these 4 can bring out lots of possible cases. A, quantity demanded is a function of its own price, P. Quantity demanded of a product is a function of the substitute price, the complements price, and the income of the household. Let's see how we define substitutes. A substitute good, if X is the main good, Y is the substitute, then the relationship between them is X or Y. If we consume X, we don't consume Y, and vice versa. If we consume Y, we don't consume X. X can be Pepsi, Y can be Coca-Cola. So if we consume X, Pepsi, we don't consume Coca-Cola, Y, and etc. and reverse, okay? So common sense would tell us if the price of the complement good increases, then the demand for our original good will also increase. How? X was Pepsi, So if the price of Coca-Cola carries on increasing, since Coca-Cola and Pepsi are substitutes of each other, the demand for Pepsi will also increase. The reverse will happen if the price of Coca-Cola falls, the demand for the original good, Pepsi will also fall. Now, what is a complement good? If X and Y are complement goods, they are consumed together, X and Y. So for substitutes, the relationship was X or Y. For complements, the relationship is X and Y. Okay. Now, what does common sense tell us? If the price of the complement increases, then definitely our demand for the original good will fall. Pepsi is consumed with a burger. So if the price of burgers increase, then our demand for Pepsi falls. In what way? We will go to a burger joint 1 or 2 times less every month because our demand will not allow us to. So if the price of the complement increases, demand for the original good also falls. If the price of the complement falls, then we can spread out more money for maybe one more extra burger to the burger joint every month. Income is very funny. As our income increases, for certain goods, our income demand increases. These are known as income is superior goods. Right now, we are all students or we have just entered our professional life. So our income is less. As our income increases, our demand for high-end mobile phones will increase. This type of influence of demand due to an increase in income is known as income superior goods or normal goods, whichever terminology you use. The text that we're following, McGuigan, they use the income superior. At the same time, as our income increases and our demand for high-end mobile phones increase, our demand for low-end mobile phones will fall, if that is our main mobile. Those are known as income inferior goods. Like I said a little while ago, there are other factors that affect the demand, but we will not be looking at them for the time being. In the discussion class, we will be looking at this table and we will be just answering from common sense because we said there were only 4 factors. There are other factors here. You will see population, you will see consumer preferences, you will see expected future price increases. How does that influence demand? Now, if demand increases, the original demand curve, black, will shift to the right. If demand decreases, the original demand curve will shift to the left. I've intentionally left a gap. If something other than price influences demand, it may influence it positively, favorably, then the original demand curve will move to the right. Right means a horizontal, right means an increase. Okay? If something other than the price negatively or adversely influences demand, the demand curve will shift to the left. Any left movement is definitely a decrease. So what we said over here was, if the price of a substitute increases, the demand for the original good will increase. It moves from this to here. If the price of the substitute fell, then the demand for our original good will also fall from D to D2. From the black D to the bottom blue D2. Stress on the word other than price. Stress on the word other than price. Based on this simple logic, we will be able to analyze all the effects over here. Supply is just the mirror image of demand. Okay, so what is supply? Quantity supply is a function of price, but 2 other components are also included. One is cost, another one is technology. If cost increases, supply will shift to the left. That's something other than price. If technology improves, supply will shift to the right because it's favorable on supply. and it's a variable other than price. So what we want to do is we want to ask the question, what determines the planned rates of sales, i.e. QS per T, the amount of supply at a particular point of time, just like amount of demand at a particular point of time. Okay, marginal analysis, we have already discussed it. And we said that we take decisions at the margin. In the previous part we've discussed. So we don't produce 10 units in one shot. What we do, we produce 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, etc. Now, 0 to 1 does not mean we are producing only one unit. 0 to 1 may mean 10,000 bottles. The units may be in 10,000. So the next unit will be 10,000 to 20,000 bottles if we are making bottles for a pharmaceutical company. Whatever it is, the marginal change means we're moving from the 9th unit to the 10th unit. Okay, and there is an average change at the same time. We have already discussed this, that the decision rule is if marginal is increasing, average must also be increasing. And we use the analogy of GPA and CGPA, where we define GPA as the marginal change that happens first. Then we can calculate CGPA, which is influenced by the marginal change. So if GPA is increasing, CGPA must also be increasing. If it's falling, it's falling. If it remains unchanged, it remains unchanged. Now, economic analysis, this marginal concept was developed in the latter half of the 19th century, in the 1860s. It was revolutionary at the time. But like any other method, it has its problems. Marginal analysis is good if we are looking at a single point of time analysis. Okay, for example, we want to consume over 1 month. Okay, no problem. But what happens if we are making an expenditure over, say, 4 years? For example, your undergrad. Before you came to Brack University, no matter where you were, whatever you studied, your undergrad was 4 years. So if you wanted to calculate the costs, you had to spread it over 4 years. How much do I spend over the first year, second year, third year, fourth year? Okay, this type of analysis cannot be done with marginal analysis. We introduce a different analysis, which is called net present value. That means how much is 100 taka worth to me right now? If I am going to spend it in one time period, then 100 taka is worth 100 taka to me. If, however, this 100 taka is the money that I'm going to spend over 4 years on an undergrad program, then 100 taka to me today is worth 25 taka. Marginal analysis is when we use the time frame as one. So if we have 100 taka in our pocket, it's worth 100 taka because we're going to spend it today. We don't have the concept of tomorrow. If we are going to spread it out over a period of, say, 4 years, then 100 taka is not worth 100 taka. It's worth 25 taka if the discounted rate is the same over each year. So what we are going to do when we make a decision over a period of time, we apply the same principles as marginal. What is my additional benefit in the total 4 years? What is the additional cost over the 4 years? Whether that principle is marginal principle for one time period or whether that's a net present value for over a few time periods. Okay. If I see that the benefit over time is more than the cost over time, I'll go for the decision, just as the same principle as the marginal principle. Okay. Now, in net present value, we introduce a concept called discounting. Counting can be done in two ways. If we start from a small value and we add up slowly, it's accounting. If we start from a large value, for example, at the beginning of the month, we have a lot of money in our pocket, and then we start counting backwards. We spend something on this, something on that. We are also counting, but we are counting in an opposite direction, which is known as discounting. So accounting means we are adding from a small value, we are incrementally adding some value and we are getting a larger figure all the time. Discounting means we start with a large figure and we count backwards, just like the beginning of the month up to the last of the month when our salary runs out. That's called discounting. So if we have 2 time periods and the discounting rate is the same, 100 taka today is worth 50 taka, 50 taka tomorrow. 100 taka is worth 25 taka if we want to spread it over 4 years over an undergrad. So if the discount rate, discounting 100 at 5% means in period 1 we start with 100, present value of 100 taka is 5. At the beginning of period 2 it becomes 95. Beginning of period 3 it becomes 90. Okay, so the decision rule is very simple, as I said a little while ago. If the present value of all benefits, the stream of the benefits over time, is greater than the present value of all the costs, the stream of costs over time, we go for it. Just like when marginal benefit was greater than marginal cost, we said yes. When present value of all benefits is greater than the present value of all costs, we also say yes. Okay, over here, this analysis is just a demand schedule. Schedule means a table. And we have prices which are per unit prices. And at this per unit, how much would you spend? That's why we use the word desired. If the price were this, how much would we spend? The price may not be that. The price may be 2.5. Then we can say actually what we will be spending. But when we have a series of prices in a market, there will never be all the prices at the same time. In our model, we ask if the price is this, how much would you desire to spend? If the price was this, how many units would you plan to produce as a producer? This is an interesting graph. And the graph is purchasing power effect. There's 2 demand curves which are shown as 2 years. The demand in 1999, the demand in 2007. Okay. What could have led to this type of leftward shift? We'll discuss this in the discussion class. And in the discussion class, we'll also focus on these 3 factors. These 3 factors are targeting. How do we target a group of customers? What are the switching costs? If we want to change our decision, there are some costs that we have to incur. How do we position our good? That means how do we make it, how do we present it in front of the buyer? So this brings us to the end of part 3. And in part 4, if we can finish it in tomorrow, great. Otherwise, we'll have to roll it over to the next week. We will introduce a concept called elasticity of demand. So this brings us to the end of part 3. Thanks for watching if you have until now. Thanks, bye.